it requires a commitment on the part of the professor. It is oftentimes, I think, easier to have someone say something, hear the awkward pause, gloss over it, and move into the next topic, rather than to embrace that. And I'm not talking about calling out an individual student. This is not about that. But it's about, oh, let's explore that perspective, or that's an interesting observation. What do you think about that observation? And as a professor, you acknowledge that you are pretty much ceding all control at that moment, and unexpected things will happen. So as a professor, you have to be able to live my motto, which is embrace the chaos, and recognize that these are some really valuable conversations. So step one is, you decide that you are going to allow yourself to lose some control in your classroom. And then you look at your syllabus really hard, and you look at your textbook, and you look at your materials, and you think, are these materials, and does this textbook, does it model what we're thinking about? Are my students going to see themselves represented in this material? And if not, could I find some better material, or use a broader array rather than sticking to one source? And that's more work for the professor, but ultimately I think it's quite worth it. The other thing is, as I'm setting up these exercises, I have to acknowledge that there's a wide array of learning styles in my class, and particularly with the assignment I do of the listening post, where my students have to go to a place they've never been and strike up conversations with complete strangers. I tell them in class that, I am an extroverted person. I do not expect that everybody in this class is, and this may be very, very challenging for you if you are a more introverted person, or if you are a shyer person. Doesn't mean you can't be a good reporter if you're not an extrovert. That's not the case at all. But this will challenge you, and it's a different, you're going to learn something different about yourself as well as about the people you're talking to. And I have yet to find someone who is not a convert by the end of the quarter. I mean, even the people who loathe it the first time, by the third time around, they get it and they're okay with it. And so not only have they grown as a student and they've grown as a journalist, but they've grown as a person, and they've gained some confidence in themselves and their abilities, and they've seen the real gift it can be to learn from other people's perspectives. I do, and they're pretty simple. When we talk about teaching critical thinking, you kind of stop and think, how do you teach someone to be a critical thinker? But you can. And using the tools that I use to explore diversity, it's really helpful. There's a lot of interconnection there. One example, say we look at a news story and we look at it as told from a certain source's perspective. And then we do what's called a Rashomon method, which is named after a filmmaker. And you look at, well, what if I took that story and made this the most important issue? Or what if I led with this person as a source? Or what if I said this was the biggest controversy? And so we'll look at the exact same story from, say, 5 different stakeholders' point of view. We'll see how many ways there are to tell that story. And then we'll talk about how we blend those all together so that we have a complete picture. And it really helps students think, wow, that this is really different. If I am covering, the fact that the price of orange juice is going to go up because there was a massive freeze in Florida, am I talking about it from the perspective of the consumer buying orange juice, from the farmer growing the oranges, or from the people who are now out of work because they have no oranges to pick? Whose story is that? From whose perspective is that story best told? And to just get them always questioning that, I think, is really important, because as human beings, we will gravitate toward the source who's most like us, right? I buy orange juice. I don't grow oranges and I don't pick oranges, so I'm probably going to gravitate toward the person who's most like me. And as a reporter, I need to learn how to check that at the door and say, okay, who are all the stakeholders, and from whose perspective could this be told? Another thing we do is we do a lot of small group work, where I'll have students trade their articles, and then I will have the other person say, okay, name a different perspective you would have used to tell this story. And so they're doing it in a very small group way, and it's not that one person is, you know, criticizing the other person's work. They're offering another perspective. And it's about that mindset that there's this bounty of perspectives out there, and the more we can examine, the better our coverage will be.